We're going to talk about ethics today. Well, when I say we, I mean they are. I've got Dr. Catherine Flick over here. She's a lecturer, what Americans know as professors, over at the Mumford University. And I've got Paul Anthony LaCen over here. He's an occasional writer for DualShockers. If you guys have any questions or statements, I'll request that you hold them off till their talk is over, and the enforcers are going to run around with microphones and get you to line up, and they'll answer your questions or allow you to voice your opinions. All right? We good to go? Let's rock.
Well, hello everyone. As a lecturer, I don't think I've ever had a lecture hall quite this full before, but then again, I'm used to students who kind of fall asleep in the middle of these sorts of things. So I'd just like to say thanks very much for coming. It's really exciting for me to see so many people interested in talking about ethics. It's the sort of, when I say to people I'm a technology ethicist, they're like, what? What does that mean? And then I have to explain it. But, I mean, obviously you guys have some idea about what we're going to be talking about, because otherwise you wouldn't have come. So I'm really excited about this. I'll just hand it to Paul for a bit.
Yeah, hi. My name is Paul. If you heard a thunk about 5 minutes ago, it was me shitting a brick at the size of this audience. I'm a full-time game design student, currently going for my degree at Full Sail University, and I wrote for DualShockers, and I'm on a hiatus at the moment, but I actually got the job from being an enforcer here last year. I'm going to just ride her PhD's coattails for the... but I think it's going to be an interesting discussion, and I really hope you guys have some really good questions.
Yeah. All right, so yeah, we're just going to give you a little bit of a talk for a bit, and then, like Ray said, we'll invite you to give your opinions, ask questions, whatever you'd like to say. You know, I mean, this is supposed to be sort of an opportunity to have a bit of a chat, a bit of discussion about some issues. I actually, for my part of this, I've cut this down from like a 2.5-hour lecture. So although I'd like to address a whole lot of different concerns and a whole lot of issues that come up in ethics in video games, we've decided as a group, as a pair, to actually just really look at a couple of particular issues that we feel is really quite dear to our hearts and that should be interesting for you to get involved in. So. First off, though, I mean, what is ethics? This is like the traditional philosopher's slide. So I'm a bit of a philosopher. I do have a computer science degree, but I'm also a philosopher. You know, I mean, we have the classics of ethics here. So we have Kant on the left there. His whole idea is deontology, and that was the idea that you should behave like you would want other people to behave toward yourself. So that's the categorical imperative. It's had the golden rule. It comes up over and over and over again in various different forms, but that's basically the tradition for that. Aristotle in the middle is he's the main guy behind virtue ethics. I mean, Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics goes back to a very, very long time ago, and his idea is basically in order to do good things, you need to be a virtuous person. So if you're a virtuous person showing all the virtues of courage, responsibility, those sorts of things, then you're likely to be a virtuous person and do good things. If you're a non-virtuous person, you're probably not going to do good things. So, and then finally on the right we have John Stuart Mill, who's the main guy behind one of the strands of utilitarian theory. And the idea behind that is to weigh up the benefits, the pros and the cons, before you make a decision, and then work out what is likely to produce the best result for the most number of people. So that's the very traditional ethical theories. I'm going to come back briefly to those a little bit as we go through and give you some examples of how that actually plays out in reality, not just in like philosophical theory, with this whole video game thing sort of focus. So, so what exactly does this have to do with games? It has a lot to do with games because really whenever you get society, you get technology, you get them coming together, you get them creating and co-creating each other, you have potential ethical issues. You have, there's always going to be some sort of impact on society from technology, and technology will help shape society, but society also shapes technology. So you have everything from, through game development, through the engines, the design, the story, quality of games, the sorts of responsibilities that developers have to their audiences, their customers, to their shareholders, all sorts of things. You also have the parts of the games themselves, so things like depictions of sex, violence, sexism, racism, addiction, realism, desensitization. You see where this 2.5-hour lecture starts to get really long. Then you get things like about actually playing games. So who gets to play games? So how accessible are games to various different groups of people? You get this ideas of community, of teamwork, of people coming together to create, of working together. You get the impact of games on real life and things like that. So that's basically how what we're going to be sort of using as our basis for the talk. So just a little bit about me. I'm a lecturer in computing and social responsibility, which is basically a tenure-track professor at De Montfort University in Leicester in the UK. And yes, it's pronounced Leicester, not Leicester or anything else. This is my second PAX East. I came here last year as an attendee, and I had a fantastic time. I'm kind of old, well, not really hugely old, but I've been playing games for quite a while. And my current favorite games are I particularly like the Final Fantasy series, Borderlands, Diablo 2, Need for Speed. I played a lot of Split Second yesterday, which was really good fun, and Spec Ops: The Line, which I'm going to talk about a lot. Yes,
Absolutely.
If you've played Spec Ops, I love you, and if you haven't, you should go play it. Yeah. Don't worry, we'll get to that, trust me. You're one guy who's played it there, yeah, we will. All right, so Paul?
I already covered the fact I'm a game design student. This would be my second PAX East. That is my wife, actually. I was born in '85, so I've been playing since Super Mario Bros. My favorite game in some time is Borderlands 2, which means I am wholly unqualified for talking about ethics. Despite that, I pretty much like action games. Not too good. I do like certain stealth games, especially ones that actually give you the option of being violent or not. My current favorite is Mark of the Ninja, though. That's pretty much all you really
He's
need
also
to know.
very good at fighting games. You should take him on in console free
No,
play.
I am terrible at fighting games. I'm good at party games that happen to have fighting mechanics.
I think I just got told. Yeah. Today, so like I said, we're going to focus on a few select bits and pieces because, as you know, you heard my big long list of all the ways that technology and society can kind of interact when it comes to video games. So we're going to have a look at basically, I'm going to look at violence because that's the big one that everyone's talking about at the moment. We're going to look at addiction, which is also something that's come up. Abuse and harassment, which is also. Like, these are all big things, so we're going to look at consequences. So within games and outside of games, the sorts of consequences that can be had from actually playing and interacting and being part of gaming. We're going to look a bit at competitive gaming, which is Paul's big thing. And then we're going to sort of sum up with a little bit of stuff about game and developer responsibility. So people, for gamers, I should actually say gamer and developer responsibility, but I can't type, obviously. So gamer and developer responsibility. So what responsibilities do gamers have when they're playing games, and what sort of responsibilities do developers, publishers? I've kind of lumped them all. I know probably some of you will hate me for doing that, but I've kind of lumped them all under that developer type label. And then we'll have the Q&A. All right, so first up, I'm going to talk a bit about violence. So violence is in games, that's been around pretty much since the dawn of gaming time, and people have been worried about it since. It seems to be this sort of undercurrent fear that somehow pixels flying around in particular ways will mean that people are more likely to go out and hurt or kill other people in some way. And it's been a big thing that it's kind of what I'd like to call a bit of a moral panic, where basically, it's kind of a generational thing where the parents of one generation will latch onto some big thing that they think to be corrupting the youth of today, and then just drum it all up in some sort of way.
Yeah, in that sense, video games today would be Eminem 10 years ago, gangster rap about 10 years before that. Pretty much anything that's new and happens to have violence is pretty much causing the decay of society.
Yeah, and I mean the thing is though is that, well, yeah, like we said, it goes back to pretty much the first launch game. I mean, in the very first types of games, you're blowing things up.
The very first video game, Space War, you play two ships that try to blow each other up in space as the first video game, and since then it's been pretty much a standard.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously with exceptions.
Yeah, and I mean, usually like, a lot of games that are developed like back then and also today, there's only really one choice that you can get. Like you play a particular game and you go out and you kill people, and that's basically what you do, or you go out and you destroy things and that's what you do, or you save a certain sort of person but kill another person, and that's somehow considered the good thing to do because that's what's required to progress in the game. But yeah, I mean, there are some notable exceptions where there are non-violent alternatives. Some of the stealth games, particularly. So
we were actually talking about Fallout yesterday, and I mean, I was being schooled because I'm a blasphemer and haven't played any of them. But I asked if you could pretty much go through a Fallout game completely without killing, and he wasn't sure about the last fight in Fallout 3, but he said otherwise, yes.
Yeah.
And I like when games give you the choice. When it's available and you choose not to do it. Stealth games, like we use it as an example because they tend to make the non-violent stuff harder to do. It's a kind of like a skill-based system. More like the best example I can use is Metal Gear Solid 4. Big Boss, you're not allowed to kill anyone in that mode. Period. You will fail if you do it. And not a lot of games actually make that a mechanic, or rather the choice, something that you have to do. I was actually talking to another enforcer just maybe 10, 20 minutes ago. No, obviously a little longer than that. But she mentioned tabletop gaming, specifically with role-playing games. And she said it's really funny when you give people a diplomatic option in certain tabletop games, because for the most part the rules aren't really spelled out. So people, like, your DM is a human, so you're basically bullshitting them. You're basically saying, like, this is a reason, and I hope you buy it because I don't want to die.
Yeah, that's completely true. Yeah.
The thing is, for the most part, in most of those games, and especially in fighting games, or not fighting games, just games in general, fighting or violence mechanics are usually spelled out. They are given to you. They're your toys, and you want to explore what you can in a game. So if the mechanics of tabletop games, like regular video games, pretty much anything tells you, all right, this is what you're allowed to do, and in terms of force, you're going to see what you can get away with. I played football growing up, and basically you try to see just how hard you can hit someone or just how much you can actually hold someone, because there are set rules for that. Whereas something more subjective, a little more human, like talking and everything, some people are going to shy away from it because they don't actually like that freedom.
Yeah, and I think this comes up, like later on we're going to talk a little bit about consequences and the consequences that come up in games for taking particular options, and then also obviously likening them to the sorts of consequences you might get in real life. Mm-hmm. As it is, though, with violence and video games, there's been a bunch of studies done. Now, a few caveats with these studies. Some of them are a little bit old. Some of them are based on old games that we wouldn't consider today to be particularly realistic depictions of violence. And some of them are longitudinal, and so they're taking place over a long period of time. And the fact is that the games, I mean, when you talk about time and technology, it's always like it's a blink of an eye, really. So the thing is, with these sorts of studies, without having an expanse of serious expanse of time, it's hard to actually be able to tell what to get the proper controls for it. So. However, with all those caveats, things are looking pretty good for violent video games. There's no real conclusive link. I've got a bunch of references there. I'll have my contact details up a bit later. If you do want any of these references, you can please send me an email or something, and I can get them to you. But yes, there's no conclusive link between violent video games and violent tendencies. A while back, the Secret Service did a survey of school shooters and basically found out that people who were likely to shoot people in schools were more likely to watch violent films than play violent video games. But mind you, this is back in 2002, so yeah. And then recently there's been a longitudinal study about aggressive children, and it turns out that aggressive children are more likely to choose violent games, but not necessarily the reverse. And then short-term, so there is a small potential for short-term increase in aggression factors. So there's a whole bunch of studies that have been done on aggression factors. So this tends to be things like heightened heart rate, increased sweating, that sort of stuff, galvanic responses. But the thing is, though, is that a lot of these experiments are very hard to control for. I mean, when it comes to, and over time this is only going to get worse, because when you're looking at these sorts of studies, you're looking at people who play video games against people who don't play video games. And the longer, the more embedded video games become in society, which they are increasingly so, the harder it is going to be to actually do controls for this sort of thing. So it gets very, very difficult to actually do this. But this is this is sort of a fun little graphic that sort of shows some of the statistics in terms of crime victims. This is in the US. I've actually put a better link down the bottom because that one that came with the table has disappeared. But anyway, it shows that basically as these very particularly violent games have been brought out, the actual crime rate has theoretically gone down. So if there were some, you would think that if there was some link between them, you would think that it would probably go the different way. But this is a very simplified, there are lots of reasons why crime goes down, obviously, but this is just a fun sort of graphic. However, and there's always one of these howevers, there are some things that violent video games can exacerbate. And one of those is bullying. And a lot of that is actually linked to the fact that there are lots of community aspects to games now. And so a lot of social aspects means more avenues for people to do things that they would do in other aspects of life within video games. So bullying is one of those. It can also exacerbate certain mental health conditions. I'm not really qualified to talk about that side of things, but this is just from the literature that I've read. And also there are various environmental sort of factors that it can exacerbate, such as I wrote environment factors, but I'm thinking sort of things like long-term exposure stuff, which I should talk about. There's been a study that just was released recently about long-term exposure to video games, and it basically said that there is a very small link between desensitization to real-life violence versus that is linked to violent video game playing. So the idea is that over time, if you play violent video games like your whole life, you're more likely to be desensitized, not necessarily go out and hurt someone, but be desensitized to violence in the real world. But the question that I'm sort of interested in is whose responsibility is it to deal with this sort of issue? And this is actually where I, as a researcher, this is what I like to think about, things like ethics in terms of responsibility. Who's actually responsible for this sort of stuff? So, you could think about it in terms of, if we go back to the sort of traditional philosophical theory I briefly introduced. The idea is if you were sort of doing this if you were a game developer and you were developing a game, if you wanted to follow sort of a virtue ethics approach, you could aim to develop a game that reflects good values, so reflects courage and virtue, like the virtues that Aristotle labels as being virtues. You could, if you were Kantian, a deontologist, you should think about the story that you're telling from others' perspectives. So, do you necessarily need violence to tell the story? Is it possible for you to give people an alternative to actually progress through the game? And then with the utilitarian thing, you can weigh out the benefits and disadvantages. It's some of these sort of, they don't necessarily contradict each other. You could do a whole bunch of them together and come up with a really nice game that has a lot of options for people that want to do different things. But it really comes down to these sorts of being aware of the issues at hand before actually going out and making some sort of purchase decision, or making some sort of decision about what your kids are going to play, or you, if you're a developer or a publisher, thinking about the sorts of games you might want society to have available to them. All right, do you want to say anything else about violence before we go on to the next bit?
You just mentioned about parents and their kids, and my wife's aunt, her kids are what, like 10 and 8 maybe? There you go. I probably met them when they were 10 and 8, and I just don't pay attention. Either way, it's the last time I visited down there, I was speaking to their father, and they were asking me what kind of games I was interested in, and what kind of games I would suggest to them. And the first question was, how much violence, or rather, what are you okay with? And they said, language is fine. Violence is fine as long as it's not a human. So they play, and whether or not that's their standard for their kid. Whether or not I happen to agree with it or not, I just wanted to know what I was allowed to kind of tell them, because I like games and like with a lot of variations. And I even asked, do you count mutated humans as humans?
I mean, this came up with Carmageddon. I mean, Carmageddon wasn't allowed to be released in certain countries until they turned the blood green, so it was obvious that they were not human. Zombies are okay? Well, there we go. Zombies are all right. There we go.
If you read the book I'm working on, you'd probably say no.
We'll save this discussion for later. But yeah, so, this is an actual, so I mean, the sort of, like, gamers now, I mean, we're starting to have kids, and we're starting to have to, deal with these, just, the decisions for our own children about what we think is acceptable, especially in a game development environment that's becoming increasingly realistic. I mean, it may be easy to say, well, Carmageddon wasn't exactly very realistic, so it's probably okay, but when it comes to some of these much more realistic, immersive worlds, it starts to become much more of an issue. All right. Okay, so this is, I want to talk a little bit about addiction. I'm not going to talk too much about this because we have a lot of other things and we're, going over time already. So, addiction. This is a Skinner box. This basically, the idea is you put a hungry rat in the box, and eventually it runs around and trying to find food, and eventually it hits this lever, which is over on the left-hand side, and a food pellet comes out. And the rat eats the food pellet and goes, great, this is good. So eventually it learns that pressing the lever makes a food pellet come out. And so it sits there and presses the food pellet all the time. And then the idea is then you can also have, within this box, you can have, there's a grid underneath the rat, and that's actually got like electric current going through. So you can get it so that you put electric current through the thing, and the rat is like, oh my god, this is terrible. It runs around the box, accidentally hits the lever, and the electric grid turns off. So eventually, the rat learns that when the electricity starts coming through the thing, it learns how to turn the lever, press the lever and turn it off. And then you can kind of, basically start to train it up so that a light comes on just before the electricity comes on, and eventually the rat learns that when it sees the light, it knows that electricity is going to come on, and it goes and presses the lever. So these are two different mechanisms that can be used to basically train rats. And video game developers do this to you as well.
Just stick it in my veins.
So game developers, they can do the same thing. They can get you to repeat certain actions, or to not do certain actions or to do certain actions in order to prevent other actions from happening. Over and over again. So essentially, with certain games, you will end up playing the game exactly how they want you to play it. And I mean, this little graphic, video games ruined my life. It's a good thing I have 2 extra lives. That was me a little while ago, but I'll get to that. Farmville. Are there any Zynga developers in here? No, that's good.
I was about to say, if so, my condolences.
Yeah, you're not going to put your hand up, are you? So yeah, Farmville and these other Ville and these addictive, these are really good examples of this reinforcement of conditioning behavior. So there's these games are not fun. They're compulsive. They're not fun. Hands up if you play Farmville or something like it and you think it's fun. All right. Does anyone? All right. I probably should have asked who actually plays it to start with. But anyway, never mind. So basically, it's a really good example of reinforced conditioning behavior. It basically puts a lot of pressure on you to recruit your friends, to build in certain ways, so that then you're feeding. You basically it's a self-perpetuate. It's almost like a virus. It self-perpetuates itself, which is it? Yeah. But anyway, you can gift things to friends. You basically require. You've got limited amounts of playtime, which you can then extend through buying things and paying Zynga money and stuff like that. And then the idea is that you work together with the people around. Anyway, but basically, it's the way that Zynga have done this to basically increase the pressure on you to A, keep playing the game, and B, play it in the way that they want, i.e., bring as many of your friends along with you and get them to pay money. It's basically, I mean, it's the Skinner box, and so there's this sort of there are things that you can get in the game which run out, and you have to get more. And in order to get more, you have to either pay money or get your friends involved in some way, or you can gift things to people and stuff, or you ask people to gift things to you, and essentially it's a big old Skinner box. You will often, if you're with these sorts of games, you have to do things like harvest and do those, once a day or something like that, and in order to then increase the size of your farm, etc. And you start to feel bad if you miss it. If you miss doing this one day, you'll think, oh, I missed an opportunity to get a bit more gold, a bit more of the stuff that I need to buy more things. And so this reinforces this sort of compulsive behavior on you. MMOs can also be quite addictive. This is the MMO that Paul used to play. I still play it, but he used to play it. This is what I was mentioning before, and I said it's a good thing I got 2 extra lives, because I basically played this for about the first year of my PhD. I played this almost all day, every day, except for the weekends when I went to see my family, and it was pretty bad. Fortunately, I woke up midway and realized that I was wasting my time and finished up my PhD with no problems. But for a lot of people, this is their life. I mean, for MMOs are their life.
I quit this game a little over 4 years ago, nearing 5. And despite the fact that you're still playing, I'm almost entirely sure that I have at least double your playtime.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest.
No, I was the type of person who... is anyone familiar with Final Fantasy XI here?
Yeah.
All right, so you guys know what H&Ms are. They are basically these big old monsters that at the time would just pop in a window. And when you killed it, the window changed and whatnot, but for the better part of 6 months, one H&M that I was farming regularly popped between 2 and 5 a.m. And I did not miss a single one. And
this is not unusual for this game. At
the time, I was proud of it. I mean, to some degree, I was always kind of self-aware. It was one of those things like, oh yeah, I know I'm an addict, but stick the needle anyway. And the whole thing, I could quit anytime I want, but I just don't want to. And this kind of goes back to the Zynga thing about getting your friends around. The reason I stayed for so long was my friends. I was wildly accomplished in that game. Back in, 2006, I had a relic weapon. The people who play the game know what I'm talking about here. Yeah. But otherwise, needless to say, the type of stuff that I had required the amount of time that I put into it.
Yeah, and that's the thing with these MMOs is they not only have this sort of social aspect where you're there for your friends, but there's also this sort of give and take thing. If you show up to help me do X thing, then I am required to stick around until you also get X thing.
That's exactly what kept me playing.
Yeah.
And I mean, you didn't want to be that kind of guy that got yours and left. That's just really bad, especially if you're a player that a lot of people know.
Yeah.
So, since I ran a Link Shell, a guild, whatever you want to call it, I was the type of person, I tried not to take things first, but if I got something, I would stay there until everyone who helped me get it and then some had theirs as well.
And sometimes this could take hours and hours and days and weeks and months and even years.
Yeah, and to the point that even if I fell asleep, people had my phone number. They're like, look, this is up, come kill it.
Yeah.
And I never once complained because I felt I owed it to the people, and they're my friends. A lot of them are my real-life friends now. what finally broke me out of it was, at one point we were fighting something, and a friend of mine just asked, so who needs anything from this? And I said, no one. He's like, why are you still playing then? And I couldn't figure it out. I said, oh, my friends. He's like, you do realize that you know most of these people in real life. You can go do whatever you want, and these people will still be your friends. And he's right. Every year I have a gathering of my old Link Shell members, and it's grown to a pretty large size at this point. And we just come by, reminisce, talk about whatever's going on, and they are my real life friends. And if you make those connections, don't let a developer use it to manipulate you. They're people. It's a one-on-one connection, and all you need is a phone number.
Yep. Yeah. So some developers have realized that this can be a problem, and I know that, I quit for a very long time for Final Fantasy, and I actually started playing it again a couple of months ago. Yeah, I know. But I'm much more sensible about it now, and that's actually in part because the developer, Square Enix, they've actually done a really good job of making it a lot more casual friendly now. So it actually is not something, the H&Ms that Paula was talking about that always pop between 2 and 5, now you just have to have an item and you trade it to a thing and the monster pops for you. So you don't have to sit there for hours and hours and hours waiting for it to show up now. Let's not even, don't. I'm sorry, Paul.
No. Like,
I'm sorry.
I heard casual friendly and my mind went boring.
But even back then, even still today. So this is the warning that Square Enix put up on the splash screen to their MMO. So when you log in, you see this screen every time. And the amount of time that I would just click past it. For those who can't quite read it says exploring Vanadiel is a thrilling experience. During your time here, you'll be able to talk, join, and venture with many other individuals, an experience that is unique to online games. That being said, we have no desire to see your real life suffer as a consequence. Don't forget your family, your friends, your school, or your work. And the picture underneath is actually a picture of my old Link Shell, which is my big guild, and I'm in the middle there somewhere. But yeah, this was after we'd beat one of the biggest bosses in the game at the time. It was Dynamis Lord, if people know what that is. But anyway, we were pretty proud of it, so we all took a group picture. And I now actually know a whole bunch of those people in real life as well. So like Paul said, all you need is a phone number. It's. Okay. So that's what we have about addiction. Now I want to talk a little bit about abuse and harassment, because this is a big thing that crops up, and it's still cropping up. And there's been a lot of stuff in the media about certain cases recently. For people who don't know, this is a screenshot. Well, it's a shot from the reality video game playing show Cross Assault, in which a bunch of people, like reasonably high level, high skill players of Street Fighter versus Tekken got together and were on basically a reality TV show. Yeah,
people actually competed, or rather, they were all playing Street Fighter Cross Tekken of their own volition, which is one problem in and of itself. But obviously, the game is better now. But either way, the problem came from Aris.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people who are in the FGC are probably thinking, well, this is beating a dead horse.
But it's actually symptomatic of a greater issue that is still permeating video game, not just the fighting game community, but across the video game community. So what happened, for those who don't know, I'll fill you in a little bit of the details. So this Aris guy was one of the coaches of one of the teams that was going to be playing against other teams within this game, this television show. And he made particularly offensive comments about one of the female players in the game, who's Miranda Picozzi, I don't know how to spell her name, but the lady on the left. And they were mostly focused on her gender. And basically, eventually, she just she tried to put up with it for quite a while, but it was just ongoing all the time. And eventually she gave up, she quit the show, quit the game. But the real problem, that was sort of one aspect of it, but what made it worse was the fact that Aris, the guy who perpetuated this particular harassment, came out and basically said, look, this is what the fighting game community is about, this is part of the culture, this is, if you can't take it, just don't bother showing up. And that is more the symptom of the greater problem. This whole idea that there's sort of there is a lot of inequality between female and male gamers still. just recently, I mean, there's been a whole lot of issues to do with a woman who wanted to do a series of YouTube videos on the representation of women in video games, the amount of vitriol and harassment that she got, including death threats and all sorts of things, just because she wanted to point out that, certain aspects of the game, of video game development and the video game community were oppressive to women in various ways. I mean, that was just, it's not something that has gone away with this particular episode. It's something that's continuing to be an issue. Although, I mean, is that, but I mean, I want to stress that this is actually like a serious minority of gamers. I mean, one of the things I really love about PAX is how welcoming it is to women. I mean, I'm a female gamer, and I've had a lot of bad experiences in my life as a female gamer, whereas, I mean, I don't go on Xbox Live anymore because of the fact that every time I do, someone says I should be in the kitchen. Or, yeah, thanks, yeah, I hear you at the back, yeah, yay lady gamers, yeah. You know what I mean, right? Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, the thing is, though, is that I mean, I know it's a minority. It's a minority of people who actually set out to do this, and whatever the reasons behind them doing it, whether it's because they feel insecure with them themselves, which is probably the main reason. But it can be difficult to stand up to. It can be difficult to, as a woman, it can be difficult to address and call people out on it, because often that just means that you're the target of more of it. And, that can actually attract more harassers, as the Anita Sarkeesian case shows. But, I mean, I think the main sort of argument can be kind of summed up in this. Yeah. So this was done back in, 2004 or something?
I'm sure you're aware of something called Penny Arcade?
Yeah, maybe someone's heard of it. Yeah, we might use a couple of the cartoons, so sorry guys, we didn't ask your permission first, but anyway, I'm sure you'll forgive us. Yeah, so, I mean, John Gabriel's Great Internet Fuckwad Theory is basically the summary of the argument. I mean, a normal person plus anonymity plus an audience equals total fuckwad. I've actually seen academic papers that deconstruct this and have changed it, I mean, there's a lot of, it's a different topic, but there is one out there somewhere. So, I mean, but one of the things we need to think about is, well, how can we solve this problem? I mean, this is a problem that affects male gamers as well as female gamers. I mean, it's not just sexism either. It's racism, it's homophobia, it's, all sorts of offensive behavior. I think the best, I saw on Extra Credit, the Penny Arcade report, there's a really good episode about abuse and harassment, where they go through and talk about some solutions. And some of those solutions are auto-muting repeat offenders on things like Xbox Live. So basically, when you start your new Xbox Live account, you start out being muted, and then as you gain reputation in the games that you play, people unmute you and stuff like that. So you can be unmuted at any time. The idea would be that over time, as you increase your reputation, you'll not be muted anymore. But then people who get muted will get kind of demoted to the auto-mute, basically. So that's one option that they brought up as a potential solution. Another one would be that you'd earn messaging or chat rights in the game tied to some other form of player reputation. So, working together as a team and kind of like a sort of an eBay type recommendation type thing. Or for teamwork games, decreasing the effectiveness of the actual abilities of the clan or the guild to perform tasks, tied if the reputation of the players within that guild is low. So for all those who used to play Final Fantasy and had some, guild that would always come in and basically spike flail Fafnir on you, they wouldn't be able to, do anything much.
What was wrong with that?
So apparently, though, these are some really good suggestions, and I think that some or all of these, depending on the situation, could actually be a really good solution to this sort of issue. Because I think it's really up to us as a community to actually get together and actually deal with these issues. I mean, there's been a bunch of talks on gender and stuff in games, so I don't want to sort of take their thunder, but we'll pretty much finish it there. But apparently the Extra Credit guys were actually invited up to Microsoft to talk about some of these issues. I don't know what the resolution of that is, but that should be something to look out for in terms of future community harassment-y stuff.
Wait.
Oh.
I have to ask, is there anyone who hasn't played Tomb Raider that plans on it? Do you care about a screenshot that happens to be late game but isn't a spoiler? Good.
All right. Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, all right. If anyone does care about this but didn't want to say, just close your eyes and I'll tell you when we're done, okay?
So we're talking about ethical behavior in games. Obviously, this screenshot kind of takes the subtitle, or rather the caption is what matters. And, the antagonist basically says there are no heroes here, there are only survivors. And, the whole thing, I'm sure if you're interested with the game, you've probably heard or read any sort of article about it. But this is a story of Lara being put in this terrible situation, her first expedition where she has to take a life. And the scene in which that happens is actually pretty powerful. But then it's almost entirely negated by the fact that you pretty much, as soon as that, you're like, oh, that happened, let's go for it. And, she has a discussion with her mentor, and he's like, that couldn't have been easy. And she's like, it's scary how easy it was. There's a base level of ethical behavior that we agree to as a society, but what becomes necessary or even acceptable kind of alters in the situation you're in. Now, in real life, the most extreme example would be war. I'm sure you know I'm sure some of you know soldiers, people in your real life that are not particularly violent, but within the context of being a soldier, you might be put in a situation where you do something that you're not really comfortable with personally, or you and all the people around you die. And therefore, you have an ethical responsibility to your other soldiers and everything like that to, unfortunately, pull a trigger when you don't really want to, maybe. Now, instead of kind of sticking to real life, within the context of games, I'm sorry.
No, well,
there is a wild variance in respect to real life, where ethical structures have been in place for a while, but they keep evolving. But within the context of games, once we step out of the real world and head into the world of fiction, our suspension of disbelief applies to a story we're presented, including the ethical structure in that story. We've all likely been presented with the what-if situation. If we're stranded on a mountain and I die, would you eat me to survive? And if you're looking at me, yes, I'm fatty, but it's worth it. And that is one situation just by a question. When we're put into the situation in a game where you're just given a narrative, there are plenty of stories, movies, books, whatever, that deal with how a person being stranded on an island, specifically being hunted by savages. If you're put in that situation, do you pull the trigger like Lara, or do you stay a pacifist and unfortunately have a friend die like Ralph from Lord of the Flies? Spoilers, but that book is over.
It's a book, it doesn't matter apparently.
And then this is something else.
All right, people who had their eyes closed, you can open them now.
And this is obviously another story with Mario. Bowser is the bad guy. He kidnaps Peach, and then Bowser Jr. swears that she's his mom. You don't really know what's going on there. But despite all that, let's play tennis on the weekend. Why not? Oh, you're not feeling that? They go karting, they play baseball, they go to parties together. They've had at least 9. But especially in the day and age where every protagonist seems to be some sort of anti-hero or Byronic, in the sense of having flaws, lacking that is actually something unrelatable to a lot of people. I don't like Superman. I'll say it. Fuck it. Despite that, I love Captain America. Yeah, I caught you. Yeah, you could... But the ability to relate with our protagonists, combined with the greater realism in games, can oftentimes cause us to apply the real-world structure of ethics within the story. And I find myself doing this a lot. The most notable example I would say is Nathan Drake. And he is pretty, like, if you just judge him on a base concept of, like, morals, he is bankrupt. And that bankruptcy is obviously why he steals for money. But, you know, he is easily the most successful murderer that Nolan North has ever voiced, and that includes Deadpool. Despite lacking personal morals, within the context of his story, he's a pretty ethical person. At the beginning of Uncharted 2, he's talking to Flynn, and Flynn is like, let's just bring guns to this caper. And he's like, man, these are just guards doing their job. If we can't do it without hurting these people, like, I don't want a part of it. And, I mean, Flynn makes fun of him, calls him Gandhi. And it's really funny for him to go, like, I'm uncomfortable with killing, because you're like, really, dude? What? You know, and, you know, in the stories, he either believes he's betrayed or he is betrayed, like, multiple times. Despite that, he's never done it to anyone. He actually is an honorable thief. And then the last one is in Uncharted 2, there's a guy that gets shot, and Chloe is telling him, leave the guy behind. He's dead weight. He's going to get us all killed. And he refuses. He grabs the guy. That whole, like, I hate that part of the game, too. Like, not storyline-wise, I just hate walking so slow. But within the context of his game, Nathan Drake is actually a pretty ethical dude. He's just also a mass murderer. Let's go to something a little more bankrupt than Nathan Drake. How about Borderlands? Pandora is crazy, and that is me understating. You basically have to kill to survive. A bunch of people got left on the planet, and they've all lost their damn minds, and everyone at the very least is psychotic. And killing is the norm there. You are an idiot for not doing that. Despite being morally bankrupt.
Nothing is more badass than treating a woman with respect.
Mr. Torg gives his guys guns, blows them up, has fun. Like, you know, I love that storyline. He is absolutely crazy. But when it's not a matter of survival, they actually show some ethical behavior. Just like a smidgen.
Just a smidgen.
When it's not a survival method, they don't come up with a contextually, like, acceptable reason to be a dick. And that's pretty much the story of Handsome Jack. Like, basically, out of context, he is a complete and utter dick. And I was actually, I've talked to Anthony Birch a couple of times. Like, granted, it was just me as a fan, like, asking questions. And the first one was, you know, at the end, I mean, he says it a couple of times, but is Handsome Jack really the hero? I mean, Pandora is a pretty screwed up place. He's just trying to give it order. He's like, what the fuck are you smoking? He's like, just objectively, he does far worse things than you do. And then the next one was, my wife brought up the panel on Twitter, and he responded, and I was like, you know, I'm going to bring up Borderlands. And he's like, I hope that your point on Borderlands is that it just isn't ethical. And then he's like, if you have to make up another point, just say, no, really, it isn't.
All right, so really, I mean, what we want to talk a little bit about now is the idea of, well, consequences, and not just consequences in real life, but consequences within games, and the lack of consequences, and really this sort of idea of the taking the real world structure, putting it into a game, and actually trying to work within that.
Yeah. So in video games, as with any story, you have characters, but it's really the only medium in which you control that character. And obviously, it's a person in a game, but you, to some degree, you obviously have to identify with it to some. And because of that, there is a lack of consequences. You do things, and if you die, whatever, you got continues other lives. Pretty much any mistake or moral choice that you do incorrectly in certain games is nothing that you can't just load again and do correctly. And despite that, or rather because of that, there is a sort of lack of consequences associated with the medium, just playing games. And then because of that, you start exploring. Why not? Like, let me just try something. If it doesn't work the way I want, I can just go back. You start doing things or saying things or just making choices that you would never make otherwise. I'm sure there are things that Diablo players do in normal modes that they would never do in hell. Or whatever the most ridiculous...
But it's even more simple than that. I mean, if you're in a game like Knights of the Old Republic or something like that, and you make that one decision that strays you away from the dark or the light side, you reset that and you do it again, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And going back to talking about the worlds and the narratives, and applying a real world structure in terms of ethics to a game, but taking out the consequences is really scary. It can be very problematic. Obviously this is where the concept of first-person shooters come in. You're controlling a soldier, you're shooting, you're killing people. Oh, I died. 20 seconds. I'm back. Doesn't matter.
What about all those poor people you killed? They don't get to come back, Paul.
I mean, they are assholes. And then, and with the advent of internet and, growing, communities that champion, trolling behavior, just being anonymous, 4chan, let's just say it. That anonymity is a way to kind of skirt consequences. You say what you want, you do what you want, and whatever. You don't need to own up to it. And I was never that type of person. I mean, I've been an internet troll for a long time, and I wasn't really trolling. I just said things in a certain way that I didn't think about tact or even humanize people. And I wasn't even anonymous, but they would say it to me in real life. I'm like, cool. I'm a 6'3" black dude. What are you gonna do?
So this is where I'd like to talk a little bit about Spec Ops: The Line. This is actually a slide that is basically why you should play Spec Ops: The Line. So Guy, who's there, who played Spec Ops: The Line, you will agree with me. I'm not going to give you any spoilers because that would completely spoil the experience for you, but what I will say about Spec Ops: The Line is this game is not fun. It is not a fun game. Definitely not fun in a traditional sense. It forces you to make extremely tough decisions. It then forces you to confront those decisions and live with some consequences of those particular decisions. But it just looks like it looks like another Call of Duty type clone. It looks like one of your general war gamers. I mean, I'm not a war game type. I'm not a first-person shootery type person. Usually, I like role-play games. But this, you put it on easy mode. I mean, it's got terrible reviews for its actual gameplay, in terms of the clicking and the shooting and stuff. Put it on easy mode. Finish it in 5 hours. But you will have the time of your life and your mind will be blown. When it comes to stuff like war games and consequences, this just completely takes the genre, it turns it upside down, shakes it around, and you just sit there going, what did I just do? What was that I just played? You will never see a game like that. The people who did this game, they had some balls, I'll tell you. They really, really, they were very brave in putting this out because it is nothing like anything else I've ever played. I don't want to spoil it for you, so that's all I'm going to say, but go talk to this guy. He will convince you. All right, we've only got a short period of time left, so we're going to have to go through some of this pretty quickly.
Rapid fire, yeah.
Rapid fire. Well, we'll probably skip a bit out.
So there's the corollary to the fuckwad theory that was represented in this comic, which is it's not so much just the base equation, but it is, without a consequence. So you basically, it's not that you're just anonymous or whatever. It's because of that you don't have to own up to anything.
Yeah.
And so, Riot's really trying. They're trying to give people the karma system to kind of encourage people to be play better, be nicer. Just giving a person some sort of reward for not being an asshole. And I mean, it is commendable, and it's something that a lot of people need to do, or rather, a lot of groups need to do. Positive reinforcement works to a point, but then you get to the fact that positive reinforcement in terms of operant conditioning only works if the person wants what you have to give them to some degree. If they don't care, then why not? Fuck it. Why am I going to have to be nice to people that are assholes and sacrifice my ability to just put them in their place? Why don't I just indulge in it? And the satisfaction of putting someone down or making someone feel bad as I destroy them is way more rewarding than some points to play with other people I don't care about. And then we're...
Well, you want to talk just a bit about this bit?
Oh, yeah. And this has to do with competitive gaming, and I mean, completely disregarding your thoughts on the physicality of it. In terms of mentality, competitive gaming is a sport. And sports are our emulation of war, anthropologically at the very least. And if your mindset goes into it, as a result, you become it's understandable if you become more aggressive when competing. It's a natural part of competition. However, there is a line, and it's crossed pretty much all the time. And usually, the better you are as a player, the more you get away with it. And this has not necessarily to do with competitive gaming, but just multiplayer situations in general. The better you are, the more you get away with. I mean, I'm a prime example. Our MC, Ray, he's one of my closest friends. He did not want to meet me in real life because I was an asshole on forums. And I mean, I still am to some degree. Like, it's one of those things where I believe that being right or being better kind of just gave me carte blanche to just say whatever I wanted. And, you know, he met me in real life, and I'm not nearly as bad. I'm still pretty terrible. But these are some notable examples. Now, Reinhardt has been reinstated to Western Wolves, but there was this competition in the UK where he got defeated by a teammate, and he just went off on Twitter. And, you know, whatever, he was just blowing off steam, right? Unfortunately, he is a public face for that group, so they fired him. He had to apologize, reconcile, and, you know, he's back, and that's good. And another example is there was, what was it? It was in Philadelphia, there was a tournament that was preceding Apex, which is the world's largest Smash tournament, in which this guy who was playing Mewtwo King decided to turn around and choke a friend of his. And don't get me wrong, I know the guy in person, not the choker, but the chokey. He is a dickbag. Despite that, obviously, talking shit is one thing. Putting your hands around the guy's throat is something entirely different. More importantly, they didn't kick him out for it because he was still in the tournament. And about 20 minutes later, he found him in a different part and just did it again. Mm-hmm. And so he got banned from Apex, and everyone was like, "Oh, we should ban the guy that provoked him into doing it." I'm like, no, there's no rule to say that you're not allowed to shit talk a person, period. You know what? If making fun of someone while they're playing a game is wrong, give them headphones. Because you can solve one problem, but a guy attacking someone is something entirely different. And then, you know, if you play League of Legends, you probably know of I Will Dominate. He got banned. Banned from the League Championship Series for being a dick.
I mean, this is really stuff that's actually, this is some really good recent stuff that's starting to actually show the game community that it's not acceptable to partake in some of this behavior, because it really isn't. And I mean, this is one of the things that I like about PAX, is that this sort of any sort of behavior that comes along this side of thing is really quickly dealt with. And I mean, it's stuff that people got away with for way too long.
Yeah, and when you do positive stuff, that's cool, but if people don't care, sometimes you got to drop the hammer on them. Yeah. And trust me, there's no player of any game that is more important to the metagame than the scene is to that specific person, especially if they're a professional gamer, because that's their career. And if you say, look, you are a public face for this company, you're a public face for this game, you're a public face for this medium, you know what? Check it. You can't do that? Then you know what? We'll give these thousands of dollars to someone else. See how quickly people get in line after that. And the people who don't care, cool, then you're balling and you can do whatever you want. Not really, but the truth of the matter is that you can't, even if they fake it until they make it, they will start responding in a positive way. And I mean, a lot of people have been saying that I Will Dominate on a stream is behaving better. So, you know, hopefully it works.
All right, so just a couple of very last quick slides. I'm just going to talk through these.
Sorry.
So yeah, I mean, when it comes to things like accountability from developers to, accountability for customers to developers. I mean, they engage in unethical business practices. We've talked a bit about a couple of things today. I wanted to talk a bit about aliens, colonial marines, and all that stuff that went down, but not enough time. But you know, voting with your wallet, it does actually work, except for the fact that,
we're like, us avid gamers are considered the minority.
Yeah.
The people that they're pandering to with all this stuff, you know, the whole thing with the BioShock cover, they're like, look, we're trying to get a lot of money, and you guys are not the majority.
Yeah.
And so as a result, we kind of go, oh, it doesn't matter anyway, and I really wanted to play this game, so why not?
Yeah.
Being a minority is not a problem. We are a vocal minority. They put a lot of money into advertising to us as well.
Yep.
And there's not a developer in the world who will say, screw you guys, you're only 20% of our money.
Yeah, and I mean also people like us, we're the sorts of people who actually go out and talk about stuff. So they want to impress us, not just the people that just buy every Call of Duty ever. But if you're also a developer, you've got some responsibilities as well. So, I mean, something I hear a lot about from an ethics perspective is if people don't like it, they won't buy it, watch it, whatever. This is not the case. Just because something is socially accepted doesn't necessarily make it socially acceptable. You're in a position, if you're a developer, of actually driving society and framing how we think about games and framing how we play games. You should be also thinking about framing what's acceptable behavior, what sort of things are acceptable in ethically and morally speaking, in terms of how people interact with each other and how they interact with technology. Just because you can do something or somebody else has done it doesn't necessarily mean you should. And think about how the games that you're likely to develop, think about how they might actually affect society outside of the immediate entertainment factor. And also just don't be a dick, basically, to all of these things. So I'm going to open the floor to some questions very quickly, I suspect. But here's contact.
I don't think we have time.
Don't have time for questions. All right, if you have questions, you can come up and have a chat with us.
Yeah,
we'll be outside. Email us, tweet us. Thank you very much.